Hi, and welcome to another Watch Geek video. Today, we have a real treat for us geeks of the watch world, a gem many watch people aren't aware of. So let's say you're in a market for an in-house made automatic chronograph. On top of that, you want it to be a column wheel chronograph with a vertical clutch. And to those of you who have no idea why one would want such a chronograph, I will explain in a few minutes. But that's not all. You want it to have a flyback function for easy lap measurements on your weekend track days. And for the fun of it, you want the minute and hour hand of the chronograph to be stacked on top of each other for easier reading. If you try to find a watch with all of these, you will be limited to only a few high-end chronographs from the likes of IWC and Patek Philippe, with the cheapest going for about $5,000. But what if I told you you can have all this plus a day-date complication for 5 times less? And if you're lucky and don't mind a few bumps and scratches, even 10 times less. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Seiko 7016, more commonly known as Seiko Monaco, a watch with a movement so ahead of its time that even today it's very hard to match the level of complication it offers. But before we move on, let's go back to the start and explain to those who still don't know, why would one want a column wheel chronograph with a vertical clutch? You see, most chronographs today use cam levers for starting, stopping, and resetting. This results in different resistance and tactile feel of each one of these functions. A column wheel chronograph, on the other hand, uses a column wheel to activate starting and stopping, giving you a smoother and more even level of resistance combined with a nice snappy feel when you operate it. This, in combination with the fact it's harder to produce than a cam-actuated one, makes a column wheel chronograph more prestigious, which is exactly why you will find it mostly in high-end watches. The vertical clutch, beside also giving prestige, solves a very important functional fallacy of regular horizontal clutch movements. You see, 90% of chronograph movements use horizontal system, where you have the main seconds gear turning and next to it you have the chronograph seconds gear. When you push the start button, the chronograph gear gets meshed with the main time gear by moving horizontally. What this means is that unless you happen to start the chronograph at an ideal time for the teeth to mesh perfectly, which is very rare, you will have an imperfect meshing, meaning the teeth of the chronograph gear are going to hit the main time gear slightly before, after, or even right at the top of their teeth. This results in a slight jump of the chronoseconds hand, resulting in a time measurement error, which, despite being very small, is kinda killing the point of a chronograph that is used for precision time measurement. Movements using this way of starting a chronograph are ETA 7750, Polyot 3133, and even the famous Lemania-based Omega 1861 movement in the legendary Moonwatch, just to name a few. The solution to this problem came in the form of a vertical clutch, something Seiko, among other high-end brands, has always used in their chronographs. As the name says, on a vertical clutch movement, you mesh these gears vertically by using a clutch system that uses friction instead of gears. So when you press the start button, the clutch spring releases the clutch, then presses on the main time gear, starting the chronograph instantly, without any jumping or moving. So you get a truly precise start and, as a result, a truly precise measurement. The more indirect advantage of this system is that leaving the chronograph running is better than have it stopped. Why this might be an advantage will be clear in a couple of minutes. Let's move on. If you're new to mechanical chronographs, operating one requires a certain action sequence. You start the chronograph, you stop it, and then you reset it. Pressing the reset button while the chronograph is running will damage the movement, as you're forcing the gears of the chronograph to jump to a certain position while they're meshed with the gears of the main time. This, on the other hand, has something called the flyback function, where you can press the reset button while the chronograph is running, and it will reset all the hands and keep measuring instantaneously. So with a single button press, you did a stop, reset, and restart. So what is the benefit of this complication, other than making sure you cannot damage the movement accidentally? Well, let's say you're an astronaut and you had to use your watch to time bursts, much like astronauts of the Apollo 13 had to when their onboard computer failed. and the mission control tells you have to do 6-second burst followed by a 7-second delay and another 4-second burst. Using the Omega Speedmaster they had, you would start the chronograph and count the seconds or do the arithmetic in your head real fast to know where the seconds hand will be after each interval, as stopping, resetting, and then restarting for each interval would simply take too long. This means that any regular watch with a seconds hand could be used, as you're just using it to pace your counting. If, however, you had a flyback chronograph, like this Seiko 7016, you could measure each interval precisely and without much thinking, eliminating a possible mistake in your counting, as you would simply press the reset button as you reach the end of one interval, which would restart the chronograph and start measuring the next interval right away. The last thing this watch offers is the stacked register, where the hours and minutes are displayed on the same subdial. This is often referred to as coaxial arrangement, so when you see these watches described as Seiko coaxial, don't think they're using George Daniels' escapement system. They're just referring to this register. The advantage of this type is that, combined with the fact I mentioned earlier that vertical clutch movements are better off with their chronographs left running, means you can use this watch as a dual time watch. The only problem is that you cannot set the secondary time zone whenever you want, but rather you have to set it by starting the chronograph when the time, at the desired time zone you want to track, is either noon or midnight. Once you do that, the main hands are going to show your home time, while the chronograph hands on the subdial are going to show the hours and minutes of the secondary time zone. The seconds hand of the chronograph will then show the running seconds of both time zones. The only thing you have to pay attention to is that the minute hand on this chronograph makes 2 revolutions for each hour, so reading it does acquire a bit of getting used to. And now for the best part. Despite all these complications, this movement at only 6.4 mm in thickness was the thinnest vertical clutch automatic chronograph in the world for more than a decade, from 1971 when it was introduced until 1987 when it was trumped by Frédéric Piguet 1185 movement that was only 5.5 mm. For comparison, the Valjoux 7750 that has none of these complications is 7.9. This movement's thinness makes these watches look very elegant, as they're about 13 mm in thickness, while today even Seiko chronographs go up to 17. There are many case and dial versions available, with the square ones being called Monaco for obvious reasons. This version, with its dark emerald green dial, is one of the prettiest I have seen. Pictures really don't do these watches justice, as on pictures they look a bit plain and ordinary, but once you hold one in your hands, and especially when you put it on your wrist, you cannot help yourself but to say wow. The case is beautiful, and the markers and hands shimmer, reminding me of my King Seiko. They just play with the light, making the watch come to life on your wrist. This watch and this movement shows a couple of things I love about Seiko. The first is that they have so many hidden and less known gems that if you dig long and hard enough, you're bound to find something that will amaze you, no matter how much you think you know about them. Another thing worth admiring is the fact they even bothered to make it. In the late 1960s, when the race for the automatic chronograph was on, it took the Swiss 4 companies to combine their resources to make a single movement, the Caliber 11. With Zenith being the exception, as they made one the proper way, meaning themselves, the famous El Primero. But Seiko went the extra mile. Not only did they make the 6139 and later the 6138 in their Sua factory, but they made Daini factory, yes, the same one that made my King Seiko 45, make their own completely independent automatic chronograph calibers, the 7015 and 7016 beating in this watch. This just shows how dedicated to engineering Seiko is. Even the mighty Rolex and their famous Daytona was using an outsourced Zenith movement all the way until the year 2000, when they finally made their own in-house automatic chronograph. All this speaks highly of how capable Seiko is, and why even the most snobbish watch lovers, those who really know watches, are respectful when Seiko name comes up. Anyways, this completes this week's review, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe by pressing this button right here, and until the next video, bye.